Good morning, everybody. Morning, Melissa.
Good morning.
Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Bill.
And Mr. David Y. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you, Dave?
Oh, doing all right. How are you, Bill?
Oh, just wonderful. Morning, John.
Morning, Bill.
Morning, John.
Hello.
Hey, John, just a little FYI. My niece's son-in-law or husband, got saw an article in a trade magazine from Equus advertising for either a financial partner or a buyer for the knitting mills.
Yeah, Michelle and I got an email last week about that, and we can talk about it when we get to the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you mentioning it last week.
Yeah, is Steve Brunner going to be on this meeting or not?
His car's there, so I don't know. You want me to call him and see if he's available?
No, I just want to know if they're going to be spectators at the Wyomissing football game on Saturday. I like to go see him. But
Yeah, I would too.
John, it's Michelle. Did you see the email from George?
I did.
Okay. Just making sure you knew details.
Yeah, that'll be perfect for me.
Were you being serious about liking having your picture taken?
Dead serious.
This is a little bit more than a picture.
Well, if I don't have to do a cartwheel, that'll be good.
Oh, I've actually forgot about that. We might have to recreate that moment. Get you some crash pads.
Hey, Steve, is that you?
He might not be able to hear you yet, John.
Yeah, okay.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Greg.
Morning.
Hey, Steve, can you hear this?
Yes.
Are there going to be spectators at the WYO game on Saturday?
That's a good question. I think they're giving out 4 tickets per kid. So if it works like the Wilson game did the other day, you'll see them on eBay. You can bid them up.
Oh my God.
I heard two
How much?
students sold their tickets at the Wilson Mifflin game for $200 a piece.
Oh my God.
That's being an entrepreneur at its finest.
Yep.
Future millionaires.
Don't I get a ticket for the $20 I gave Darren?
No, you have to give 100.
Okay, what time do we have here?
8 a.m. on the dot.
Okay, let's get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Is there any public comment?
Not for me.
Okay, hearing none, we shall move on to the Berkshire Mall, which Chris and McCarthy and myself and Michelle had a meeting in face at the Happy Hollow Pavilion. And, you know, for all the bad things I've read in the Philadelphia Inquirer and, you know, hearsay, I think the attorney for the people who bought the mall, he said all the right things. And please, Chris and Michelle, you know, jump right in here to say if, and I know Bill is acutely interested in this, but they say they have contacts and they're probably the biggest mall developer in the US, and they want to get anchor tenants and they want to do what it takes to get it right. I'm going to leave it up to Chris and Michelle.
The only thing
Go ahead,
sorry.
Michelle.
I said
No.
the only thing I'd add to that is I learned a long time ago when someone's relaying a story, there's his side, there's her side, and the truth lies somewhere in between. So in regards to, you know, we didn't ask about the situation in Voorhees Township, New Jersey. Mr. Gavin actually somewhat volunteered information about that, which made it sound like that township had a very specific intent for what they wanted done with that property, and we're not going to approve anything other than that. But I agree with John. I mean, he said the right things. He followed up, at least in sending the agreement to Chris and I that we had asked for, that shows how the tenants and anchors are responsible for, you know, common maintenance in the common areas. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and his time frame was 1 year.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, it's not going to be forever. It's, well, you know, the guy, I think, was forthright and a gentleman, and we've just got to let him run with it. I mean, we don't have any other options, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, part of what he was trying to explain and justify is their concept of subdividing the anchors off of the building and selling to these stores that would own those anchor spots. And the document that Michelle referred to is a document which explains how they would manage the operations with that kind of scenario. And it does appear to me that you know, they would maintain overall control and require the owners of those anchor stores to coordinate their maintenance and to maintain standards, even though they were the owners of those anchor stores and were not the, you know, they were not subject to an owner that owned the entire mall. So that was an important point for me to, and for us to get an understanding of if they proceed with their proposal to subdivide the anchors off, you know, how is that going to work, and is it going to maintain a quality property? And you know, these guys have done this many times before. They have a concept. It seems like it's a workable concept. So I'm comfortable with what they are proposing in that regard. Another thing we talked about at length was, you know, their understanding of how mall properties are evolving around the country with other uses, meaning, you know, there can be residential uses combined with a mall. There can be educational uses combined with a mall. And there can be, you know, other uses, so that malls are becoming more of a mixed-use property. Excuse me, but their interest is still in having a strong retail component, and they see those other uses as making it possible to have viable retail because of what those other uses bring to the property in terms of, you know, using services and goods. So I think we have a pretty sophisticated understanding of the market for the kind of property that the Berkshire Mall is. But he did say they don't have any plans to bring, residential or educational at this point to this property. That's not their plan. I think their plan is to try to, get anchors and then see where it goes from there. Because as he, and I think this makes sense. You got to attract a couple of anchors and then see what will be complementary with those anchors and build out the whole property from the anchors. He did suggest some anchors that, are not local businesses in this market, but are businesses that they work with in other malls. And so I think it also makes sense that somebody who owns as many malls as they do has relationships with certain anchor businesses, and they're going to try to bring a couple of those people that they're used to working with to this property. So I would agree with John that I think it was certainly a positive meeting, but I also am, like Michelle, anxious to see how it actually works out.
Did they mention,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I would say to neatly segue into item number 4 on the agenda, which is the revised draft overlay regs. One of the things that, Chris mentioned they want to do is subdivide off the anchors, which would create a whole host of zoning issues that variances would be required for. Knowing the zoning hearing board and the precarious position that would put them in for setting a precedent, what we discussed with Mr. Gavin was that he is going to send me a sketch of what it is they would like to do to subdivide those lots off. So I can do a zoning review comparing it to the underlying zoning regulations in the C2 zoning district and the draft overlay regulations we're already working on, plus our commercial and industrial overlay district, which already includes the Berkshire Mall site. So Chris and I can figure out what type of language we need to write into the draft regs we're currently working on, create a redevelopment area specific for the mall, and then adopt everything all at once, and they can move forward with submitting land development and subdivision plans.
And, what Michelle has just described is what we had talked about at our meeting with the attorney representing the mall owner. I think we may want to just do a separate ordinance for the Berkshire Mall. And the reason I'm saying that is, we already have spent a lot of time on the overlay that was based on the, strategic plan study that the borough did. This could take a little while further to come up with these new regulations for the Berkshire Mall. And I guess I'm concerned about delaying too long acting on the ordinance that we've already developed that is intended to kind of help stimulate the economic development around the medical school. And I don't know what you think about that, Michelle. You and I haven't talked about what I just said, but I'm, my gut feeling right now is that, I'd like to see that the economic development overlay that we've already put together move forward and not get delayed while we work through these Berkshire Mall issues.
I agree with you because I was contacted by Burke Surveying yesterday that they intend to submit land development plans for the Ryder lot, which is in redevelopment area number 2, based off the draft regulations I've provided to the developer that's interested in that site sometime in November or December.
Yeah, and again, I think we haven't gotten the base information we need from the Berkshire Mall to even start those regulations. So, my recommendation would be that we keep moving forward with the enactment process, with the overlay that we've already spent a couple of months working on, and start a separate project for the Berkshire Mall zoning.
And along those lines, the County Planning Commission does now have the draft zoning map and the draft regulations that they've started reviewing.
Mhm.
Isn't that some of the issue that Muhlenberg Township got involved with? You know, that was the delay of anything happening to Fairgrounds Mall.
It was tax breaks. They were trying, the developer on that site was trying to get some type of tax break. And my understanding was that Muhlenberg Township was reluctant to do that, partially because of the school district impact. And partially because I don't think at that point, the developer was fully forthcoming with what the end result of the site would look like.
Okay.
And with the
One
Berkshire
other
Mall,
question I have.
go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, they're not proposing
No,
any
this is-
demolition. They're not proposing any demolition at Berkshire Mall.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Well, that would help speed the process.
There was, John, you said there was looking at a 1-year time frame. Where do they actually want to be in 1 year?
They want to procure 2 tenants for the other anchor buildings, and then maybe you have to fill out the biggest square footage area first, and then you put in the pieces of other prospective tenants. And you know, for me, I think it's kind of aggressive to put it together that fast. I don't know, but that's what they said. So they want to get the anchors and then fill in the blanks.
Would the condition of getting those anchors be part of spinning them off into separate properties, or would they get the tenants first and then spin it off?
No, you have to get the anchors first. Is
Yeah,
that correct, Chris?
Yeah, they would sign up the anchors, but I think before the anchors went in, they would want to spin off those lots that they wish to create. So the subdivision process is going to start quickly, but they're hoping by the end of this year to have signed agreements with anchors. He said that they have in hand a stack of proposals for acquisition of those anchor stores, and they're also talking to Boscov's about whether Boscov's is going to exercise or purchase the unit where Boscov's is located. So I think their schedule is by the end of this year to have agreements in place, and then within a year to have those anchors occupied.
Yeah, Keith, they would not mention any specific prospective tenants, but they did mention tenants that they had, anchor tenants they had at other properties across the U.S. So they have a lot of contacts, and I presume, from what we read in that Philadelphia Inquirer article about Voorhees or whatever, I think they want to get this thing up and running. And Michelle or Chris, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, they're not generating revenue with the way it is. So, and they're in this to make money. So they need to have activity there.
So if I'm visualizing this in my mind correctly, the mall, the way it looks today, would remain that way from the outside, and there would be pad sites throughout the parking lot areas.
One of the things they mention is they are considering flipping the entrances to the individual tenant stores on the inside to the outside.
Right.
But yes, they're also talking about pad sites on the outside.
Okay. My other question, and maybe the agreement that first it was Al Boscov and then it turned over to Jim, was that, they had right of first refusal with the previous owners of the mall. Do you know if that's still in existence, or is that a moot issue now?
We don't, but Jim McCarthy raised an interesting comment during our meeting, which is that that agreement was also apparently tied to Berkshire Mall West, which Allied Properties, who had been the Berkshire Mall owner, does still own. So was that agreement severed when the properties got separated for ownership, or does that agreement technically still stand, which would be a very odd scenario?
Well,
Well,
that's why when Permane Brothers wanted to go into Mall West, Boscov said, no, we want them inside the mall. And that's why that whole deal fell apart.
Yeah, well, the specific question you're asking, Bill, we didn't ask it in our meeting, and we don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
Bill, I can tell you based off a conversation I had with Joe Nasty, who was the property manager for Berkshire Mall and Berkshire Mall West, is still the property manager for Berkshire Mall West. They are in active talks to have tenants going into the Old Country Buffet and H.H. Gregg sites. And I mean, he was actually willing to tell me the name of those tenants, which he's usually not willing to do unless he's 99.99% sure the lease is going to go through. So I can follow up with him and see where they are in that conversation. But I mean, Allied is still trying to get tenants in Berkshire Mall West. And I know they were also working with Spot Stevens and McCoy to do a land development plan to relocate the driveway that's located on the west side of the property down towards AC Moore. They were going to close that off and put a new driveway entrance in roughly right in the middle of the site. Now, we've not received those land development plans yet, but I can also ask him what their intent is to move forward with that as well.
But that's great. I just, Al Bosca may have done wonderful things for the city of Reading, but he certainly didn't help, our situation with, as it related to Berkshire Mall.
May I ask a question? May I ask a question about utilities?
About what?
My question about utilities is if this is subdivided, must they each provide water and sewer connections?
Now, well, their intention, well, your question is one that we're going to need to think about as we prepare regulations that would enable the subdivision of the property. Their document that they shared with us provides for cross easements for all those things so that even though ownership is separate of parcels within what is presently the mall, excuse me, the document provides cross easements so that all of the users of those utilities would have the right to continue to use those utilities. So, excuse me, the question of whether or not we would require as a borough new separate utility connections is a decision for us to discuss. I mean, personally, I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, we would have to think about that, but I think it may be an unnecessary burden to place on them to require some modification of the utilities.
Well, if the property is subdivided and the main anchors own a piece of land that the water main and sewer mains go through, and that anchor suddenly goes bankrupt or closes shop and just kind of abandons the property, what happens to the maintenance of those lines to sustain the rest of the properties?
Well, these easements would be placed on the property before any sale of lots occurs, so that the rights of all the lot owners to, use and, if needed, maintain in order to preserve their use would survive any bankruptcy. But I mean, it's a good question, and we need to make sure that the documents are effective for the purpose that I described. But I think that's workable, and another example of that is over in the old VF complex and stuff, there's a lot of utilities there that are shared, and there are cross easements, and those properties, that whole complex of properties has been subdivided for 50 years, and there are a lot of shared utilities and shared access and things like that.
Okay, I would not treat it lightly, because I keep thinking of the fact that if some anchor goes in there and then suddenly closes shop in this quickly changing world we're in, and there's a water main involved in it, you wonder what happens if they do not maintain that and the rest of the complex, including sprinkler systems, are not usable.
Yeah, well, again, as I read those documents, the other tenants have the right to go in and do whatever repairs are needed in order to preserve service. But your point is very well taken, and I agree with you. That is one of the consequences of subdivision that we need to be confident is going to be workable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what's next?
Next is the revised draft overlay zoning district regs, which we effectively already talked about. I don't have any other information to add to that. Chris, do you?
No, we're waiting for Berks County comments, and when I submitted those to Berks County Planning Commission, I was thinking, well, maybe we're going to tag on the Berkshire Mall to this. Maybe it's not quite finished yet. But, again, my thinking has evolved on that. I think we ought to just move forward with the enactment process for that overlay and work separately on regulations for the Berkshire Mall. So my suggestion is that after we see what the county comments are, that we then move forward with a public hearing and consideration of enactment by council.
Is everybody okay with that?
Sounds like a good plan.
Yep. How about number 5, Michelle?
No major update there either. We were supposed to have a meeting last Monday that the group collectively decided to postpone until this coming Monday because the technical committee, that's one of the subcommittees, asked for more time to prepare the information that the group as a whole needs to start planning the RFP sections.
Okay. Hey, Michelle, do you want me to comment, or you want to comment on the whole Equus situation?
Yeah, I actually have a couple things under miscellaneous, but I mean, you're welcome to start, John.
So Michelle and I got an email from George Haynes, I think on Monday, that Equus wants to divest itself of their ownership of the UGI Energy, a couple other properties, Teleflex, and their rationale. There are 3 parts of that. First of all, once they get done doing the development, it's the best time to sell, and because they have long-term leases with UGI Energy and the Reading Hospital and another one who Teleflex, and I don't know. It just escapes me at this point. In any event, they think it's more attractive for another investor to buy it with these long-term leases and the low interest rates in the first place. And it's attractive to Equus because they think in the event of a Joe Biden victory, their capital gains taxes could double. So, and they gave Michelle and myself a heads up, just said, we didn't hear it on the street, and I appreciate it, that, hey, here's what we're doing. And they're on it full speed ahead. And if you want to add something, Michelle, please go right ahead.
Well, to clarify, the properties that are for sale are UGI, the 202 building, which is actually in West Reading, building 113, which is the building to the west of Sly Fox that Tower Health IT and training department is in, and then Teleflex. Based off of properties transferring in the borough recently and, concerns we've had about things we've heard about owners, I did let George know that we had some concerns, who's going to potentially be the group you're selling this to. And he said it's a super institutional investor base. It's not anyone local. Like John said, these are 17, 20, and 25-year leases that will continue. So it's not like the new owner is going to come in and you're going to see a complete change in any of those tenants. The tenants that are there are going to stay long term. The other potential good news is that, he's estimating the sale price is going to be anywhere from $125 to $135 million. So that will be a nice transfer tax.
And he said that they would like to manage the properties, but a lot of times the new buyer will want to manage it themselves, which I don't know if it has any effect on us one way or the other, except we know who we're dealing with Equus.
Yeah.
He's also been quick to add that this by no means should imply that Equus is getting out of town and never coming back. There's obviously still portions of the knitting mills and the VF North lot that they will still own, and they are still actively pursuing other sites in Wyomissing and surrounding municipalities.
Yeah, I mean, we hit the lottery with Equus, and I hope they don't completely go away. And as Michelle just said, there are other properties that they still have their hands on. But I don't know, maybe we'll get somebody as good as they are to come in here and take a look around. Maybe they'll do something else here in the borough. I don't know. It's a crapshoot.
John, as I mentioned to you before the meeting started, for those that didn't hear me, my niece's husband is involved in same type business as Equus, and he sent to me the other day advertisements / articles out of 3 trade journals that they're all that Equus is looking for either a financial partner or a buyer for the knitting mills. And that's already been published in 3 trade journals.
Well, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. When Michelle
Yes.
and I got the email on Monday, it was already in the works. So, and I respect them for letting us know
No,
first.
that's very professional of George to do that.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what anybody thinks about that, but those are the facts. And
Yeah, they got a business to run, and they got to run it, the way they need to.
I don't necessarily know how this affects what could go. We did the overlay district. I don't know how it could happen at the Reading Motor Inn or pardon me, the Inn at Reading. I'm an old guy. And excuse me. But or some of the other place at the Ryder situation. But I think there's with the medical school coming in, there's people know that there's opportunities here in the borough. And I think that people know that the borough is open for business. And I think that's the best outcome of what happened with Equus, because we didn't give away the ranch. We just expedited what they wanted to do, and it benefited both of us. So I don't know. we'll see what happens.
Well, I think the idea that they're turning over already developed properties is a good thing because it means they're freeing up their capital to do other things. I would be concerned if they were marketing undeveloped sites that they have in the borough. That to me would be a bad sign, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
No, I don't think so.
The only other thing that I would say to that is, and Steve, maybe you can chime in, but unless this impacts the assessed value of that property, that's where I would have a concern. If, someone else buys it up and says, oh, it's not worth what it was before, blah, 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 they go for an appeal to their tax assessment, then we lose money.
I don't know
Well-
that there's a justification for them doing that, Greg, because all of these properties were just reassessed within the past 12 to 18 months based off when the certificate of occupancy was issued. And, I think the sale price behind that, Equus bought this property for $3 million, stuck roughly $100 million into it, and now they're just selling portions of it for potentially 125 to 135 million. So I wouldn't see what the justification would be for depreciation in value.
Sure, no, I agree, Michelle, but you never know. I mean, believe me, I've been through this too many times over a 12-year period of time to see things that happen that, you just never thought would happen. So I just wanted to throw caution to the wind there a little bit, but
Well, the only thing I'm skeptical about is the Reading Hospital or Tower Health or whatever. I don't think they have the resources now to buy out the Ducom lease and turn it into a nonprofit, but it could be on the horizon, and we've talked about it before. Hopefully, the county will reassess in the next couple or few years, and that will kind of put a stop to people's concerns about the inequities of assessments in Berks County. I don't know what you think, Chris, or.
Well, I think the risk on this is not right now. I think the risk on this is at the end of these leases that are in place. I think at the end of the terms of the current leases, that's when there's likely to be some kind of possible buyout by Tower Health and conversion to nonprofit status.
Yeah. So. Okay, I think we've covered everything unless somebody else has something they want to bring up.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
I have a couple updates on other properties. Like I mentioned, the Ryder lot, aside of Jim McCarthy's office that's vacant, should be seeing land development plans for that in roughly the next 2 months. Some of you may notice that Gary Broming's property, it's Zenith Properties, Inc., that encompasses Laser Quest down to the Army Recruiting Center on Burn Road. That was listed for sale or lease. I have a Zoom meeting next week with Heidi Misano, who represents the potential buyer on that owns clothing, like an athletic clothing apparel store that they want to put partial office, partial retail space, and then partial warehousing into the Laser Quest space down to where Double Sunrise Yoga was supposed to go, which is on the other side of Baja Beach. There are going to be potentially some zoning issues there because of parking and prior violation notices that were issued. So I will keep you updated on that one after my meeting with Heidi next week. Stratix is unfortunately not going to be moving into Jeff Hettinger's space at Wyomissing Square. That deal is no longer moving forward. Building 17, that's part of the Wyomissing Square property, which is the standalone building tucked in the back behind the Met, was sold approximately a month ago. And I am working with the new owner of that and another potential tenant he wants to lease to as to fitting out the space. They did start demolition there, interior demolition. There's not going to be any change from the outside of the structure. One of the concerns that did come up is that the water for that property, water and sewer, used to be fed through the Met. When the Met was reconstructed, that service was terminated. So no one looked into this before Building 17 was sold. Jim Babb got a call this week from Berkey, who's the contractor for the new owner, asking where the water service came in at. And, that's when Jim determined, well, it was severed when the Met was constructed. So that new owner is going to have to trench, 300 to 400 feet out to Hill and Reading to be able to put a new connection in. So I don't know what impact that's going to have on how quickly they get that building up and running, but that's obviously not good news for them.
Has the new owner of Building 17 investigated whether or not the Met violated any of the cross easement agreements that affect that property? That would be the first thing I'd look at before I dug a trench, is to investigate whether or not the Met had the right to terminate that water service.
This only just came up yesterday that Jim identified that the service was terminated and, that they're going to have to trench, but I will relay that to the new owner.
That's not a borough issue, but if I were the new owner of Building 17, I would certainly look into it.
I'll pass that along, Chris. Thanks. Does anybody have any
Anything else,
questions?
Michelle?
Nope. I would say if anybody has any questions on any of those projects, feel free to ask, but otherwise that's everything I have.
I don't have a question on that property. I just noticed a lot of activity at Premium Beverage. What's going on there?
So Maiden Creek Plaza, which AKA Giorgio Mushrooms, they're turning that into warehouse space. They had been leasing space out by the airport that, I guess, even if you're just storing mushrooms for a certain period of time, which I guess they have to do before they put them on grocery store shelves, certain conditions that interior space has to meet that the FDA regulates. And the FDA came in and said that space wasn't meeting those requirements and they were paying an exorbitant amount of money for rent, and realized, hey, we own this building in Wyomissing that we're not even using. So now they're using it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
They're using it, but not using water.
Correct. Not, at least not to the extent that Cot was.
Right.
Nobody uses water like Cot did.
Mushrooms are like fine wine. They have to be aged before they're consumed.
I
Apparently.
agree with the aging concept.
Does that mean I have to let them skip cutting my grass in my front yard for a week to let them age before I pick them?
I wouldn't eat those, John.
All right. Does anybody have anything else?
Yeah, one other question. Now, yeah, of course, nothing happened this year, but Michelle, have you heard anything with the Reading, was it Burke's Visitors Bureau, since we became a member of that?
You mean regarding the tax?
No, well, yes, the tax,
hotel
and
tax?
just what are they, anything happening with them?
Yeah, so Crystal actually did send an email out maybe about a month ago. Let me see if I can find it quick. Just giving us a brief update. I mean, she was actually shocked that even with the pandemic, the revenue they had collected was less than what she expected, but it was still a decent amount. I think it was still around $100,000.
In what time frame?
That was from January through when she was reporting, which I believe would have been like potentially end of July through middle of August. Now that's not just from Wyomissing hotels, that's from all of the hotels countywide that agreed to be, part of that agreement. I don't know what specifically they're doing right now to market, but I can find out.
Yeah, I'm just curious, since we, we paid to belong to this and really haven't
Actually,
heard anything after that.
we don't pay anything for that room tax.
No, but didn't we have to pay $2,000 to get on the bus with this?
I'm not recalling that.
I thought we did.
I don't remember that, Bill. But we can look into it.
Yeah, I think when they first came to us and asked us to get on board with this. I think the initial fee, membership, if you will, was around $2,000.
We're not a member of that though. It's the hotels and the actual groups that want to be part of the marketing they were coming to us. I mean, that initial meeting that John and I went to with Kevin Barnhart and Crystal Seitz, or maybe that was Pat and I, sorry, my memory's bad. That initial meeting was, we want to create this room tax that the money is siphoned off and goes specifically to marketing the region. There's
Right.
no cost output by the borough. Would you be interested in doing this?
Okay, and then maybe I misunderstood that. Okay.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Have a good day, everyone.
Enjoy those
Okay.
mushrooms, John.